Yeah, thanks. I wanted to take the opportunity to give a little bit of picture of how, inside Mapbox, and I lead the community team at Mapbox, how inside we think about working with HOT and what the processes look like and the tools look like, and just what we try to offer to HOT as a company. And first of all, we love HOT, right? It's a big part of Mapbox every day. It's a big part of our history. It motivates the people who are there. It's a very mission-driven place. And people come to Mapbox because of the connection between Mapbox and HOT. And I feel like a lot of how we operate internally is inspired by the OpenStreetMap community and the HOT community. This kind of open collaborative space is something we try to cultivate within Mapbox and how we work outside of Mapbox too. So the most explicit framework up until this point is in 2015, pretty soon after I joined Mapbox, we made a public commitment to HOT. We thought it was very important to explicitly state for ourselves and for HOT what they could expect from Mapbox when a crisis struck. So we developed an activation protocol aligned pretty much with the HOT activation protocol and committed ourselves to deliver mapping and imagery. I'll go through all of it when there was a need. So that's public, and also we have a public GitHub repo, Mapbox/mapping, which has that commitment, how we work and who to get in touch with, which I thought was very important, especially based on time of day. We have global coverage. We have a team in Bangalore and DC, San Francisco, and Ayacucho, Peru, and Berlin. So depending on disaster strike all times of day. So depending on if Manning is awake, reach Manning, otherwise reach me. Yeah, we wanted to make sure that this was viewable to our team, to HOT, as well as to other companies and organizations that work with HOT. That being transparent about this commitment was very important. And there's a long history here between what became Mapbox, Development Seed. We have the CEO of Development Seed here, Ian, and we had trained up a OpenStreetMap team. And this is a couple photos from Camp Roberts, which was the site of many experimental, scrappy weeks of folks brought together from very different backgrounds by John Crowley, who is who's not here unfortunately, but who's been on the HOT board and very involved in the setup of HOT, as well as all of the imagery sharing methodologies like Imagery to the Crowd was developed under John's watch. And Camp Roberts was basically in 2009 in August brought together me, Eric and Tom, and Robert Snowden, who's now at the World Bank, who were at Development Seed at the time. Well, I guess he's a PhD student now. I don't know what his first association is. So this was from Sahana, there were guys from Google there, Stamen, and we were just on this kind of deserted army base in Central California for a week. We all brought our computers. Imagery showed up from Afghanistan. We started to hook all of the tools together. I had a completely offline version of OpenStreetMap running on my laptop. And we developed walking papers or field papers from UAV imagery, which was flown during those days. And basically, up until this point, it was sort of, if you look at what happened now with Irma and with Harvey, it's just the default assumption that something like the HOT response and the whole digital response to disasters is going to happen. There's no question. But in 2009, there was no assumption whatsoever that these tools would be ready to help the response. And we never had until this point, there's been a lot of talk about it, but until this point, a chance to actually hook all these tools together via open data and open standards. So we got a chance to test things out at Camp Roberts. Development Seed was building some of their first maps, which then inspired them not too long later to start Mapbox. And 4 months later was the Haiti earthquake, where we HOT really, for the first time, proved that this was a viable way of creating geographic data after disaster. And we have a data team, so of course we map. We have 40, 50 folks primarily in Bangalore, India, and Ayacucho, Peru, who their job is to be part of OpenStreetMap and create data in OpenStreetMap. And most of they focus on areas that are important to Mapbox products, but HOT is a big part of what they do as well. And so when there's opportunity, this is part of their day. And so this is a picture from Bangalore mapping during the Nepal earthquake. And the team has basically taken part and just created data in pretty much every event. And we try to also take advantage of just the expertise and the tooling that has been developed inside Mapbox to provide something more. So during the Malaria campaign, we were doing validation. That takes a little bit more experience and something that they're very familiar with, because that's also part of the workflow within Mapbox, is checking each other using the tasking manager. And we also ran 2 fix jobs. And what 2 fix does is it's another microtasking process where you can run an analysis. Here we ran analysis to identify overlapping buildings or crossing buildings from the Malaria campaign, because there were quite a few. And then basically they're presented to the team one by one, and they fix things. If they might delete one of the buildings or whatever. And so this a little bit higher order mapping power is what we've tried to bring. And it's not just the data team that maps at Mapbox. Everybody maps. Absolutely everybody. There's a picture with Marina in it. There's new to the community team. We celebrated OpenStreetMap's 30th birthday, I don't know. So we made a map tape that you can't quite see, but the map was all of the data team edits over the last year. During Irma, as things come up, we've been making those opportunities to contribute to hot tasks available to the entire team. So here's just a screenshot from Slack discussion. Let's post in Hello World about mapping for Irma. And every single person who joins Mapbox, whether they're doing finance, whether they're coding an Android SDK, whether they're in Berlin or Ayacucho or China, is learning to map. And especially with Mapbox growing, there are fewer people who are coming from the mapping world, and so this is a lot. We're introducing something new, which is really important to Mapbox. And it's sort of one of these touchstones of becoming part of Mapbox is also becoming part of the OpenStreetMap community. So we do everything in GitHub in terms of internal coordination. And here's all the people who joined this week, and then they're matched with a buddy on the data team. So there's someone who's experienced who they can ask questions of, and they can develop a relationship with someone in another office. And this is happening every 2 weeks. We're just helping people to become a part. And some people really like it, and some people are like, oh, that was fun. I'm going to go back to working on my spreadsheets. But we want to at least make sure everyone has exposure to creating maps and creating map data. Now, there's a few of us, I'm included, who have stepped up a notch, either before we joined Mapbox or during, to be full voting members of HOT. And there's 130 or so folks who have taken on additional responsibility to the organization in terms of its governance and its operation, and just holding, being there for it. So Pratik, Menin, Sajad, and myself, we're all members of HOT. I'm the chair of voting members as well in HOT. And just wanted to say, this is something we spend time, we're very busy, so I don't know how often we have to, but it is okay to spend time on HOT stuff at work, even if it's not just mapping, but our commitment to attending the annual general meeting, or attending working groups, or spending time on like code or other things. This is part of what we do every day, and so we build in space for that within our jobs to do this level. So for a while, a big part of what we were contributing, among many, was Imagery. And among many, the State Department, Mapbox, Digital Globe, who am I missing? Everybody. So that's a map of we did a lot of identification of gaps where there were hot projects, where there could be updates to the Mapbox satellite-based map. And this was over last year. But what Mapbox is finding these days is there is so much imagery out there. It's like we are not finding a need to step up for this as often because, you know, Digital Globe, both the premium and standard layers, and they're releasing data for any major disaster. So, and Open Aerial Map, and like we're awash in imagery, and so we're really ready to do more imagery if it's needed, and maybe it's trying to focus less on the like the disaster response and more on the project side. But we'd love to do more, but I mean that's fine. It's great if that's part of I think the spirit of pod is like everyone can contribute something to create something that's more of a whole. If we spend less time on imagery for pod, that's fine. We can dedicate our time in other ways. We do visualizations like this. You may have seen using open source tools. So Eric Fisher made the visualization on the top. That's from the Nepal earthquake response. And so you see Kathmandu was mapped before through Open Cities and Kathmandu Living Labs work. And then over the response, you can see all of the roads filling in. We did, Lucas built an animation of all of the malaria response. And we're talking, was it almost over 4 million buildings or nearly 5 million buildings, over 500,000 square kilometers. And using Mapbox tools, we can animate that. And this is just focused on Livingston in Zambia, but you can look for the malaria animation and see the whole world. And this is all open source, and so it's not like, I wouldn't say it's turnkey, but it should be possible to take this approach to build these kinds of interactive experiences of what HOT does for other places. And I think it's super important. Like both of these animations on World Malaria Day and then during the earthquake, like these were shared everywhere and immediately like makes an impact of what HOT does. So this was shown everywhere to like, you know, in the media to, you know, reporting to donors. I'm very happy that like the tools that we can take the tools that are much harder to build. I have no idea how this stuff actually works under the hood. It's like I'm a developer by background. It's like it's magic, but we can just stand on the shoulders and apply it to things that are important to us. Like we do a lot of software development. Some of it is pretty involved in our day-to-day work, and some of it is a little bit extra. So we use, like Drishti talked about how Facebook uses a task manager as part of their data team, and we use it as well. And so there's just a listing of pull requests that Sanjay has participated in or has submitted to the tasking manager. So we are contributing back features that we found useful. We've been a big part of the scope and design of OSM Analytics, which runs off of OSM QA tiles, which are actually generated on a daily basis from Mapbox infrastructure. And UFlood, was deployed not by us, but by another team for the Harvey and Irma responses, where you crowdsource basically which road segments are flooded. And this was a fork of work that the data team had done for the Chennai flooding, I think 1 or 2 years ago. And so it's really great to see things that we've not even like really spent a lot of time and care on. We open sourced it, it's out there, but they were able to pick up the code and run with it. So we try to, as much as possible, share what we're doing internally and make it useful for others. Yeah, communication, we have a blog which a lot of people read, so whenever we get a chance to talk about HOT, like the post that Marina got up yesterday about the HOT Summit, we want to amplify. So if you ever have any, it goes for everything that we're doing. If there's anything you ever think that Mapbox could help with, let us know. But we often, we're very happy to talk about HOT. And we've done things like take part in developing longer pieces. This is the open mapping for the SDK side, which is part of the the Data Partnership for the Sustainable Development Goals, which I think is being talked about in the other room right now. This is a white paper explaining HOT and how it aligns to the SDGs to people who have no idea about what we're talking about here. They're trying to explain how it works, and then, as Tyler explained from the start, there's a chart in here which aligns each SDGs to the kind of mapping projects which could be undertaken from HOT. So we were part of writing this as part of our contribution to communications. Yeah, we have a good bit of money being a private company, and that's one of the easier things you can do as a company to support, and it's super important. So we're sponsor, of course, of the HOT Summit. We did a matching donation, I think, last year or the year before for HOT's fundraising, and so this is never be afraid to ask a company for money. Like they have much like our budgets for this kind of thing, not just Mapbox. And it's of course something we can do. It's one of the easier things to do, to be honest. And yeah, I was looking for a good picture for this, and I don't really quite have a handle on what I'm trying to get at yet, but I think we all find that in the course of our work, I mean, have you ever had the experience where you're talking to like two people in the same bureaucracy and they don't know each other, right? And you're able to connect them and they come together. You might even be in a bureaucracy and then connect outside. So there are formal structures, and I think a lot of what the idea behind HOT is to make the mess like on the right through showing what you can do with data. How can we also collaborate and work together on other levels? And so when we've had the chance as Mapbox to make those connections, like we make them right away. And I think that's something everyone does every day, and it's something that's part of being part of the HOT community, is being ready to make a mess of hierarchies. I mean, hierarchies are important. You know, it's not like we need that needs to be there. We're trying to be more focused as well along themes which are not just about disaster response, as HOT is as well. So there's been such, this is even before like the 500K thing came out, like identified that there's a lot of mapping happening for malaria. And so within Mapbox, we put together like a strategic plan. Like, here are all the things we are going to be doing for this campaign over the course of the year in terms of mapping, software development. You can see the visualization, communication, coming to events, and so just to say, like, internally, like, we try to be very, especially as the team is growing, like very coordinated, and like we're almost 250 people ourselves or over. We also are trying to like make sure everyone knows the direction that we're going, how you can contribute if you're not as close to OpenStreetMap and data inside Mapbox, and then make sure that we're measuring and hitting the goals that we set for ourselves. It's not just some side thing; it's something that we want to like be successful at. So, more GitHub tickets. We have a humanitarian program that's been around for 10 years. Just like if you need something in the middle of disaster, let us know and we'll unblock whatever it is. So we've been doing that a lot over the last couple of weeks. I don't know, we've had a dozen or two requests come in, and sometimes it's like technical, sometimes it's hitting account limits, and we just try to clear the way. And not like, if you're responding to a disaster, you shouldn't be worried about the technology or about the accounts or anything. And new for us is community team. This is basically, I mean, I think as a month ago, there were 0 people in the community team. Now we're at 4. Some of us were there before, and some are new. But we're taking the approach, everything we've learned from working within HOT and trying to apply it to other areas of endeavor, whether it involves OpenStreetMap or whether it involves mapping tools or something else. The way that we collaborate together is sort of like the inspiration for how we approach social justice, or environmental issues, or indigenous mapping rights. This is HOT's the inspiration for this. Cool. Yeah, 20 minutes.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that was a great overview, and yeah, I think it showed what an important partner and supporter also in the countries.
I'm really interested to. I felt like this was a really nice deep dive into what Mapbox is doing. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts about like a more abstracted point of view. Like, I feel like as OpenStreetMap becomes, or as more and more companies get involved in OpenStreetMap, what is the inspiration to not just use OpenStreetMap, but to contribute back to the community? So learning more about why this is not just the history of Mapbox, but why it's a priority for Mapbox to continue being part of the OpenStreetMap community for their like company goals. And then also what are, instead of, again, organizations, companies just using OpenStreetMap, which, may or may not be wrong, like I'm really interested in those entities being part of and really investing their time and making it a priority to be engaged within the community with the data. So
yeah,
large question, but I think you
need to define the business value. Like that's definitely. So we've gone through that exercise
sorry, and also like what your abstracted recommendations are for companies. Like if everybody here was sitting like, like what should we do?
So I think there's 3 questions. So first, as we've been developing like the structure and the process for the community team, we've been very explicit about like there's a lot of people who want to do good stuff at Mapbox, but we need to like if you're a company, you need to understand why are we doing this? How does that improve us as a company? Mm-hmm. So there's recruitment value in employee retention and satisfaction. People want to be a part of something and contribute to something, and that's why they come to Mapbox. There is like brand and communication value being associated with something which is so good. There's value to our products and to how we work. So this is a challenging space to work within, and often, our big customers are not in Zambia, they're in Silicon Valley and other places, and that shapes what we build to some extent, but we want to make sure that like what we build is useful everywhere and for these kinds of things. So it makes our products better and opens up new opportunities for those products in the future. Am I missing something, Marina?
I think the product innovation and development is a key one. Just like fascinating challenge that people come to.
And then, like I said, it inspires how we work. Even though we're growing and we're formalizing more, we have to write more formal processes. We want to also be messy at the same time. Then other companies, I think. So this was part of why we thought it was important to publish the commitment, because we wanted also for other companies to see that. And I would say, I'm not saying it's like directly like influential, but it's like Digital Globe publishes an activation protocol, and they have like a public declaration of what they're going to do with open data. And that's a change because for years Digital Globe was there, but you didn't know what you could rely on, and you didn't know what you could ask for and when. So being public and transparent about what you're offering is super important. I think in pretty much every company which is involved in OpenStreetMap, I think is really taking this on and is looking at not as an abstracted process, but how can it be something where you're giving back, whether it's data or whether it's improving the community as a whole. And the challenge, I think, is that it is easy to silo. Like this is true of Mapbox. Like we're very focused on what we do, and it's very easy to build for ourselves. It's much harder and it's easy to create data in OpenStreetMap altogether, but it's harder to build software in the, collaboratively. It's harder to build like processes and governance collaboratively. So that's why I'm also on the board of the OpenStreetMap Foundation. So I'm very excited about the very new element of the advisory board, which contains representatives of corporate members as well as local chapters in OSM. And I think Hot should be there too, to figure out together like what more organizations which have different interests but have a lot of resources and want to do something. How do you organize together as big entities in the same way that we're able to organize as individuals?
I'll jump on that a little bit. I think there's certainly a lot of companies that are using OpenStreetMap data, and that particularly those teams that are using it want to be part of the community and find ways to give back and have that interest. But it seems like sometimes it's harder, particularly in larger organizations, just because of almost like an expectation and cultural difference between the companies they're working in and Hot and OSM in general. And I think Mapbox has gotten around that in somewhat by just having been involved in Hot and that culture from the beginning. But what advice would you have, kind of maybe even going the other way, on how, if we're interested in making that making those teams and companies, those individuals who want to be doing more, making their path easier to convincing their companies to do it, what are things from the Hot side that we should be doing?
Yeah, I think Hot can provide clear guidance on like the direction to take and also like how to navigate within this world. Like I think we still do a very like poor job in general of not Hot necessarily, but in OpenStreetMap, introducing the community, how everything works. And I don't know if anyone really understands how OpenStreetMap works because it's so complicated, but providing a little bit more familiar looking guidance to, like the data for SDGs guide to open mapping was trying to address an audience in government and statistics offices to how to work with Hot and OSM for the SDGs. I think similar sort of materials or sort of like guidance to companies that not necessarily like our champion, the advocate who's already there who gets it. Like it always takes that seed of someone, like Drishti or like to bring this within a large organization that may have a different culture. But what else can they have in their back pocket? Not just in terms of like, certainly like being able to like bounce ideas off each other is important. Having a network is super important, but you're going to run into the same questions and the same, and there's something like I love the annual report looks super slick. Like that's the kind of thing you want to slap down on someone's desk if they have a lot of questions. It was one thought. It's just like more supporting materials so that it doesnn't look so, doesn't look so loony and crazy, right? It's not just a bunch of random volunteers who are creating the map together. It's actually very, very highly structured. But that's not the story that you hear about it outside of the community.
I just want to say I think you guys are way more optimistic about company involvement. That's cool.
Sorry, I have to.
Damn your optimism, Mikel.
Yeah. So I guess it's the right place to be optimistic.
We can talk about it.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could say a little bit more about the validation tools that you've developed and how easy they are for organizations to use.
Yeah, I mean, 2Fix is not super easy, but we've spent a lot of time with OSM Shop, which was an open source project that we've been doing a lot of work on validation of our pipeline and as well as the interfaces, and we saw like, this is doing what we want, and we've worked closely with the author, Louis Marcel, over the last 9 months, and we're going to be talking a whole lot more about it at conferences and on the blog, but it's just getting started. We're seeing a lot of community uptake of OSM Shop as a way of like tracking the change and validating each other. And I'm very interested to hear feedback on like how that's working, how it can be better, and back to like Melissa's question, like where Facebook is doing validation, others are doing validation. Is there a way that we can not silo that effort as well, because we're all already mapping together, right? So can we validate together in a way that also satisfies our business requirements?
Yeah, okay. That is a sign. Yeah, but thank you very much, also. I think a very important discussion. And you also around for the next.
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks.